Welcome to In the Black, the podcast that shines a light on resilience and the power of reinvention. I'm Araceli, and each week my co-host Shannon and I sit down with incredible women who have faced some of life's hardest challenges, from personal setbacks to societal obstacles, and have emerged on the other side stronger, driven, and ready to make a difference.
On In the Black, we celebrate these stories of strength and success, diving deep into the journeys of women who turned pain into purpose, adversity into action, and now dedicate themselves to making the world a better place in their own way. They're here to inspire, share hard-earned wisdom, and remind us all, no matter how dark things may seem, life is cyclical and dawn is coming. So whether you're looking for inspiration, motivation, or just a reminder that change is always possible, this is the podcast for you. Welcome to In the Black.
Today, we're joined by Elaine, a woman who has truly carved out her own path through life. From getting fired and arrested to navigating a difficult child custody battle and embracing her own journey towards sexual freedom, Elaine has faced it all. Despite the challenges, she's learned to let go of the shoulds and follow her inner guidance. Through each trial, she's gained deep wisdom and found peace in the chaos. Join us as she shares her powerful journey of self discovery and the lessons learned along the way. Welcome, Elaine.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about yourself, what you're doing right now, and just a brief bio on who you are.
All I can basically say is that I'm a modern mystic, which means that I am in this world mostly I'm a participant, but I'm at the same simultaneously, I'm an observer of it. So I kind of wear two hats most of the time. I measure the quality of my life by how connected I feel with source. And source is neutral. I'm not speaking of any type of deity. I'm speaking of how I feel connected with life itself, the force, the life force. So how alive I'm feeling. Am I feeling not so alive today? Am I feeling really lots of vigor, a good sense of well-being, or am I feeling, very lost? Who am I? Why am I even here? I think I want to go back to bed, and sometimes I do. And I get in my bed and I say, "This is where I belong." Because it feels so damn good. How can I not belong here right now? And that's what so that's pretty much, it's like I'm like a barometer. And as far as what am I doing? Well, I started doing Tantra body work in 2008. And I move away from it. I go back to it. It's a dance I do right now. It is an offering. It is on the internet. It's on a website. I have a website up. I'm also doing intimacy coaching, which I've started in about 2012, and again, off and on, off and on. And both of those are very, very enjoyable. I would not do anything now in my life that doesn't resonate with me. I just turned 65, and actually, that's been my mantra for the past kind of 20 years. It's actually more than that. But, let's just say that I think, balance is important, and that's the way I live. So those are the focuses. And if a project comes up that I'm inspired about, like writing, which, I just finished my memoirs, Raising Elaine. There's 17 stories in here. And as you can see, I've got a lot of quotations that I am planning on putting on. So I put some on social media and others. It's coming out. It's in paperback and it's in obviously Kindle, but it's also coming out on Audible. So that's exciting.
So fun. I love that. Let's take it all the way back to the beginning. What you've been through is just fascinating.
Well, that's why I had to write 17 stories. And I could have written more, but, I got to the point where it felt like it was complete and it painted the pictures that were most significant ones. I've always, even in the first story is Wild Child, growing up in this, the dynamic was so lonely and so confusing. And because I've always been a mystic, even as a child, I observed that too and knew it was not good. It was not good for me. But you live in a family and you have to stay there. So it wasn't until I got married at 19 and tried to have a family and realized that it was totally not me. I'd already raised my younger siblings. What was I doing in this situation? And then divorced, and then once out, a single, knowing that I was stunted in many ways, especially emotionally and socially, because of the vacuum that I grew up with, and the horror, and the tragic, the sadness. I knew that the only way I was going to give my inner child a new life, a happy one, an enjoyable one, something really worth living with, enriching, which is who I was ultimately wanting, was to recreate a new life. And that would have to include a smart mom, which I would have to be for this child. And it was helpful that I was giving my children good experiences, because then I had the opportunity to re experience some of childhood things that I hadn't. And so I was experiencing it with them as a mom, and I was also experiencing it as a child.
Can you just dig in a little bit more? You said your childhood was so sheltered that you feel like you were not
Well, it wasn't
necessarily.
okay. Let me correct that. Sheltered usually implies there's protection. My childhood was like a vacuum. There was a lack of, it was desolate. It was like being in a household, but not being connected to anybody there. You came and went. You got a meal, you had a bed. There were no traditions, there were no parties, there were no celebrations, there were no conversations. There was mental illness. And that caused a chaotic, unpredictable environment that none of us, I have four siblings, wanted to be around. And so spent most of our childhood either out on the streets, which were safe, where we lived. And I was the 60s. So we basically spent most of our time with our friends, and whoever friend we had, we would basically take them on as our family. So the childhood life was, I didn't feel safe. I could have a drop down fight with my brother and no one would intervene. I could receive phone calls from an adult man and no one would intervene. And I would talk as if, okay, why are you calling me? I'm 10 years old. Let's meet at the school playground because I want to know who you are. And that one of the stories is talks about that. Fortunately, he didn't show up and I didn't get abducted. My brother and I, we could ride our bikes to anywhere in the city we wanted. And I say we could have gone to another state. Nobody would have noticed. That's the way it was. There were no constraints. On one hand, I wasn't receiving the programming that other children were receiving about being a nice girl. Girls don't get angry. I didn't get any of that programming, which left me wild and untamed. But also, I didn't get feelings of security, of reassurance and validation, which left me open to vulnerabilities and a lot of uncertainties that I would have to sort out on my own because it wasn't explained to me. So that's what my life has been all about. It's been about self awareness. I'm really the only one out of my five siblings that has gone on this particular journey. We all became estranged. My two sisters married and they stayed married. They've been married forever, had the nuclear families. I'm the only one who's gone out like on their own. The other, my two brothers, one did succumb to depression. And unlike me, I did get good treatment. He did not. And it ended tragically. The other one has never been mentally stable. I don't even know if there's a diagnosis. I really think a lot of things we call mental illness are really trauma that is showing up, and they're really medicating traumatized people at a young age. So my brother has the mentality of maybe a 14-year-old, not because he's developmentally delayed. It's because no one ever took him beyond that. And he never had the chance to go beyond that in society because he had a psychotic episode and was right away medicated as a teenager and then stayed in the system his whole life. And so I don't think it's schizophrenia or anything like that. I really think it's trauma.
Let's dig in a little bit more. I know you talked about how you were arrested and
Oh,
went through
mhm.
this divorce and fought for custody of your kids. I am familiar with some of those things in my own life. And
Mhm.
so I'm really curious to dig in. Can you kind of just continue on that journey with us and tell us how those
Okay.
things happened?
Sure. So when I left my husband, I was a medical coder. I had gone to college while I was married and I got my certification. I wanted it to be an amicable thing. I left him, but I wanted to be amicable. And it started out that way. 6 months later, he remarried. At that point, he, being a very unsophisticated person, he ended contact with me. Just wasn't going to talk to me anymore, and then became brutal as far as taking me off of the car insurance, not agreeing to discuss when and how we were going to arrange the children visits and this and that. And then he had legal services through his union, and I began to get letters for different things. And so that began. 2 years into that, I decided that he remarried and was having children again. I was now teetering on the brink of sanity with regard to working and being a single mom and having and managing this antagonism. And one night I got to the point where my head was spinning. I was on it was like two realities were converging. Uh, and one I was hitting my children, and the one I wasn't. And I had to take a deep breath, and I decided that I would take my children to live with their father and his wife the next day. I didn't know it was going to be permanent, but they ended up growing up there, and they were now 8 and 10, 9 and 12. So we would go to court back and forth for the next 7 years, and I would pay child support, and he would continue to take me back to court for child support because he had these legal services. And sometimes I would show up in one of the stories I write about getting out of bed, not doing anything, no hair, no grooming, nothing, leaving the house and showing up at the courtroom. I said, if he's going to talk about me and depict me as a mentally ill person to my children, then that's what the judge is going to see. So I was just like, I don't care at this point. And so I told the judge that, I had to watch my medication and I really couldn't work more, couldn't pay any more money at this time. And that my self care was the most important thing. And to which he said, maybe you should find another doctor. And it was very, very difficult. What can I say? I was in the typical male non custodial role where the man kind of fades out of the picture because the ex wife is making it so hard for him to see his kid, even though he's paying child support. So I was just like, should I disappear or I'm not going to disappear? But maybe I should have, because what was the end result? Oh, the end result is that my kids are alienated from me because they grew up their whole lives with the propaganda that they were fed. And so you're only as wise as you are at a time. And I was taking him for custody because I wanted a sane situation. I was living in an insane situation, but my kids were in the middle. And that was the tragedy that I wish I would have recognized and just bailed and just said, okay, I'll see them when they get older, because I don't see them now. But with the way I look at life, it's not as traumatic as it might be for some other women, to be alienated.
That's had to be so hard. I know that a mother's heart is always with her kids. And for me, our situation was pretty opposite. I have 100% custody of my kids now. And so definitely a different dynamic, a different fight. Um, and it was so challenging going back over and over and over again to court. And I know that is why a lot of women do give up. It took 11 years for me to get custody of my kids. And
Yeah,
so,
the emotions are unbelievable, and you can understand why drastic things happen. There was a point there where I truly identified with being in the valley of the shadow of death. I mean, I tasted it. I said, this is what that means. And yeah, you do suffer, but you do grow also. There was a lot of growth that took place as well. A lot of things, we could have had a lot of different lives depending on a different decision. And we make certain decisions, and then it's like, okay, this is the reality I'm managing right now. Let me manage it the best way I can figure out how to manage it, right?
absolutely.
And let
That's
me, yeah, and let me learn, let it not be in vain. Let me, at least learn from it, because otherwise I am not going to waste my life. You know,
absolutely.
I'm going,
Yeah,
yeah, like, so I've always been an opportunist, even when I'm suffering. It's like, what can I get from this? How can I milk this experience? Because this is how life is presenting itself. Whether I caused it, whether you create your own reality. I created this reality. I'm in it. Well, okay, let's work with this then. What are the takeaways? I'm learning who I really am. I'm learning what my dreams are. My kids, they're away from me, so I have the time to explore what it means to be. Oh, I always wanted to be independent. I didn't know I wanted to. That was my dream. Nobody talked about dreams when I was growing up. Then I started to remember, what kind of shows did I like? What kind of I loved dancing shows, and I loved when we had these contests in the neighborhood. So I became a belly dancer. I said, okay, I wasn't a dancer growing up. I tried. I went for ballet lessons. I had to wait till I was 12 so I can pay for them myself. And it was a little bit late. But now I could be that professional dancer, and I became a professional belly dancer. So, okay, I love the show That Girl with Marlo Thomas, and she was like, it was one of the few independent women shows at in the 60s, and that resonated so powerfully with me. And here I was with my own apartment. I was, now on that path to independence. And my psychiatrist had told me, he said, Elaine, then this was when I was still married, because I had already been in gone into a psychiatric hospital for depression several times. And that began in 1982. And now it was 1986. I was living on my own. And so he has said to me that some people are fine being married and raising a family, but some people need to be independent, and you need to be independent. I didn't know how he knew that. It was just like, how do you know that? I don't even really know that. And then now I was seeing what he was saying. So then I stayed in the conventional work. I would go back to college I stayed in medical coding, and then I saw there was no room for growth there. So I said, okay, I'm going to go back to school. I'm going to get my bachelor's. And then I started substitute teaching and coding part time and belly dancing. So I had three streams of income. That was good. And got the bachelor's. Still didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. I was now about 30, 32. And it was like, I'll go back for my master's. And so I continued to go to school, be a student, and do my three, gigs. And while I was substitute teaching, one of the principals asked me to be a long-term sub. And I said, well, I had never thought about being a school teacher. So I decided that this was going to pull together different strengths and it was going to be catalyst. I saw this, I intuited this. This was a chance to step up to the next level of professionalism in the world, to be seen, to just grow exponentially. So I took that on and that's what it did do, all those things. And that led to I got my master's and it just so happened that because I had stepped up to the plate for this, I decided that I would be a teacher now. So I sat for the boards, passed them, and then I began school teaching. I didn't know I was an artist at the time. I didn't know how creative I was. I didn't know how I knew consistency was not my strength.
So let's talk about that transition. Like, obviously, you're following this path that's kind of, the laid out path that we all take. You go to school, you get a good job, you are now this substitute teacher, and you're getting your master's, and you're doing the things that are kind of expected in society. Obviously, at some point, you transitioned into chasing your dreams and your creativity and that sort of thing. What was the spark for that, and how did that?
Okay, well, I want to take a step back because actually I left the conventional work. I only stayed in the conventional field from 86 to 88. And in 88, I said, look, if I can't be creative, if I can't do something else besides code, I've got to leave here. And that's what I did do. And then it was like, how can I create a lifestyle that's going to pay the bills? And then it was, I had been belly dancing, but now I upped the game more. And then I learned about substitute teaching. So that was my first kind of creative art project for my life. So as a life artist, that was that wasn't the first because getting out of the marriage and going to school that was really a project, but this now in the work world, creating an unconventional way to put together three kind of ways to pay to create a stream of income. So that began in 88. Now I was springboarding off of that into I was doing it again. So this would be chapter in the work world, this would be chapter 2. Come 2001, glad I kept my foot in the coding door because the school teacher thing is ending. I return now back as a part-time coder. Then I decide, what can I do now? It's time to make another change because the thing that always was my fear was getting sick. I had to support myself. I didn't have a family. No family to fall back on. No sisters, no siblings, no parents. My parents were alive, but they were like children. And so it was like, I cannot get sick. I cannot get depression. Each time it started looming and the symptoms started, I would do my best to manage them, but then I could see the writing on the wall that this is only going to last so long. And I've got to begin making changes. And here's where I guess you could say being a very creative comes in handy because many people they end up at these points and they really see no room for change. They don't see options. And when you are creative, you almost kind of find them. You're in tune with another part of something that brings up other possibilities. Instead of going to the bar and sitting and ruminating, I don't know. It just doesn't happen. You get inspiration, but it doesn't happen overnight. So I left the coding field in 2005 and went out on mental health disability because I knew I was, not well. My judgment was getting erratic. And I voluntarily admitted myself to a psychiatric hospital for a timeout. I had no social circle, no support system, even when I was at that age, 45. Ultimately, it wasn't like I had a family I could go to and spend a week and just chill. So it was
Yeah,
so
I
I
definitely
would put
understand
myself
that.
in the hands of strangers. I would go to the ER. I'm suicidal. That was my way of taking a break. And then I put my hands in these callous environments because that was my only choice to just get away from everything. So after a couple of weeks of downtime, I started to feel like, oh, I can imagine. I said to I remember saying to, this was in 2005, I said, I kind of can see myself going out to eat at a restaurant. And he said, really? Tell me about that. What does it look like? What does it feel like? Because for 2 weeks, I was just, I don't know if I want to be alive. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know anything. And so when I started to have these feelings that of doing things that I had done before, I knew I was almost ready to go home. So when I did get home, I was just like, oh, I think I'm going to be a decorator because I've always been good with creating, nests, my own places. So I put that iron in the fire. And there's a funny story in the book about a guy trying to be an interior decorator and how that became very comical.
I love
And
the
this,
self-awareness that you've had throughout your life, it sounds like. So could you talk us through the successes of how you're handling your self-awareness and how you're handling, kind of getting in tune and knowing yourself and how you are. Take us into, what you're doing now, the successes that you have now, the projects, how you're helping people, how you're reaching out, and how you're showcasing like, hey, you can become something and you can be something amazing despite everything.
okay, yeah. Well, I would say that it comes from self-awareness, but you have to really find your mentors. And whether you want to listen to Joe Dispenza, whether you want to learn from Eckhart Tolle, you have to begin with your mentors. You have to begin with your core values and your beliefs. So for me, my spirituality was fundamental. No matter what, self awareness and wisdom was ultimately the most important thing in my life. And then you have to question everything else. Every action, is it coming from a program? Is it that was instilled in me as a child? Where is that thought and opinion? And abstain from opinions. Don't give an opinion for a year and stay off of social media except to appreciate something, appreciate it, much appreciated, a like, but stop giving opinions until you learn if they're genuinely yours or if they're a programmed response. So we're coming into, AI, which is a great thing, which can be a great thing because it's going to free us to start asking these questions because we won't be so caught up. It's also going to give us opportunities to create space in our lives. Most of us don't have any space in our lives. It's bam, 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 bam. That doesn't produce self actualizing people.
Yeah, I've always said that we find ourselves in the margins of life.
Exactly. And that's not enough space. A margin here and there, you have to have space every day. I was saying earlier, my calendar is never full. I loathe a full calendar.
I always ask every guest this, and we talk about how we've taken a negative in our life and we've turned it into a positive, and that's the entire meaning of in the black, because it's the financial term from being in the
Mhm.
negative and taking it to the positive. And so, in your own life, what does being in the black or creating an in the black experience, what does that look like for you?
Well, it's taking lower based emotions like anger and fear and transmuting them through love and meditation into joy and compassion, which is what we're designed to do. That is our power. That is what our heart muscle, our consciousness is designed for. We just haven't been taught that. We need to teach that to our kids, that they're creators of love, and we're all alchemists. We can all transmute. We can go to the gym and get things out of our system. We can do all of these things with our mind. And
Yeah.
but we're not taught the skills. We just need to learn them, but they're out there now. Fortunately, there's a lot of good stuff. Let's not be fighting. Let's say both exist, because who knows if it doesn't.
Could you give our listeners one piece of advice for people who are maybe struggling with the same, that may be having the same struggles that you have had?
I do take medication for depression and anxiety. I always have taken it. Very dangerous now at this point in my life to even consider not taking it. But there's an ancestral thing. And so to ignore that would be, I tried ignoring that, and it was very stupid. And there's a story in the book about that when I tried to wean myself. So in some cases, the medications can be very, very helpful. In some cases, they're being prescribed so recklessly, it's malpractice right from the start. So it's complicated if you have depression. It's very complicated because I think ultimately either it does come from an ancestral wound and trauma that's manifested in this lifetime, and a lack of spiritual focus in our society. I think if we all reached for more, I'm not talking about, I'm talking about practical spirituality where you be in stillness, you take on meditation, you take on things that focus your mind. These are practical spiritual tools. I would say everyone can benefit from practical spiritual tools across the board.
Can you just go through maybe like three practical spiritual tools that people could grasp?
Yes, the law of attraction. Learn what it is and put it into practice. Manifest intentions and manifestations. Learn about them. So you don't have to learn a whole lot about energy and vibrations, but it is good to know that your thoughts vibrate and they have a frequency, like a radio station. And you can determine the quality of the music you're going to play. Obviously, you want to play the best. So you're going to think the best thoughts. You're going to put the best intentions forward, but you're not just going to say them out loud or write them down. You're going to feel them. You're going to imagine them. You're going to see them in your mind's eye. What is it I intend for my life? I intend to have abundance. I intend to have a strong body. I intend to have a strong mind. Those to me are fundamental. Those are my fundamental intentions. Law of attraction. When you set your intentions in place and the manifestations show up in a beautiful home with nice clothes that you can purchase and feel good in, that's the law of attraction now. You're attracting abundance. Money is coming in. Yeah, sure. I don't even have to work that hard, but I brought in some good money this week. Yeah, the bank deposit was real nice. Yeah, so it's not about the old theory about having no pain, no gain. No, don't buy into old cliches. Old cliches are of the matrix. They are designed to keep you small. Only question them all. When you find yourself saying same old, why are you saying that? Are you saying that because you hear it and you're saying it? Or do you really believe that your life is the same old, same old? And if it is, then do something about it so that it isn't the same old, same old. So I'm just saying, live life more consciously. Don't sleepwalk your way through life. Most people are sleepwalking. Wake up. You may lose friends. That's
I
okay. But you're going to
I love
find things in the place of that. They were superficial friendships to begin with. They were holding up a false sense of security, a false identity that was causing you so much stress to even maintain. But now that
it.
that's over, you get to begin and you get to be real and you get to relax. It was like the first time I went in a psychiatric unit, I was like, you know what? I know this is a psychiatric unit, but like, I feel like a weight's been lifted off of me because I don't have to pretend about anything. These people don't care if I, anything in my family is weird. I don't have to pretend. I don't have to, keep a secret anymore. Just be real. No apologies, no explanations. That's it.
We have a
Stop.
rule in our house called no secrets, only surprises.
There
And
you go.
so,
I like that.
yeah,
Yes.
so the only
Well,
thing that you can keep from anyone else is surprises.
okay.
And where can our listeners find you?
Okay. So they can buy my book on Amazon. It's called Raising Elaine, Razing. Uh, and it has a website too, which is listed on Amazon. I also have my site for sexuality because we didn't get a chance to go into that. As a former sex worker, which is another. Maybe I'll come back and we can talk about that. A lot of funny stories there. So that site is Soul Times, and it's the word soul and TYMES. And there's a lot of good blogs on there, and where I question romance and explain female arousal and how men need to understand certain things that where we're coming from. We still love them, we're just not in the mood, and that's the real truth. And we're not hiding anything. It's really just did. It's very on the surface. We love you. And like, no, you're rejecting me. Why are you saying that? It's only sex. But to a man, it's like, but that's how I say I love you. If we don't have sex, then how can I say I love you? But he doesn't know how to verbalize that. But ultimately, that's what he is feeling rejected by because he can't tell you he loves you then. And then you're saying it's only sex and it's blowing his mind. And then you're getting annoyed because he's getting annoyed. And so there's a blog about that too. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing. Your stories are just fascinating. So I will put that in the links for our podcast.
Thank you so much for coming on today. I really appreciate your time.
I appreciate you too. Thank you both,
All right.
really.
Thank you for joining us on today's episode of In the Black. I hope today's story left you feeling inspired and reminded of the incredible strength that lies in each of us. Our guest today has taken her toughest challenges and transformed them into something beautiful, reminding us all that even in the darkest moments, there's always a way to find light in the world.
If you enjoyed today's conversation, make sure to subscribe and share In the Black with another woman who could use a little encouragement. Together, we're building a community of passion, purpose, and power. Until next time, stay strong, stay inspired, and remember, your story matters. Your choices change things, and being your most authentic self can and will change the world around you. Hi, I'm Araceli, and I'm inviting you to the In the Black experience. Imagine waking up to the sound of waves, journaling with the sunrise, and ending your evenings with soulful reflections under the stars. This is more than a retreat. It's a space for deep healing, creativity, and connection with like-minded women. If you're ready to transform your pain into powerful purpose, the In the Black experience is calling you. Spots are limited. Reserve your place today.